Welcome once again to Syntax Error, your pretentious philosophical pedantic podcast ostensibly about video gaming and related topics therein. Warning, this podcast contains mature language, content, and spoilers. You have been warned.
Okay, welcome back to Syntax Error. Today we'll be discussing moral mechanic quandaries. And as always, I'm Scott Thurlow, and I'm joined by Ian Manzer.
Hello.
Chris Morgan.
Good evening.
And Stephen Amosi.
Hi there.
Okay, so tonight, guys, we'll be discussing basically morality mechanics in games and whether or not they're A, effective as mechanics, as getting you immersed in a game and or character, or what message and story they're trying to go for in a given game, and should these mechanics in fact go away? Are they archaic in a sense? Are they so non-effective that they should just stop being used altogether? Or are there cases in which they are indeed effective and therefore are a valid mechanic to include? I'll ask Ian first. Go ahead.
Well, I feel that morality has its start in the Dungeons and Dragons games. And I think it's most effective there because not only is it good and evil, it's order and chaos. Mm-hmm. And you're dealing with a world where they have defined gods who have specific ideas of what good and evil
allegiances
are.
To each.
But when you break it down past role-playing games, and specifically into video games where you can't have as dynamic a system as Dungeons and Dragons has, you start breaking it down. And there's also in real life no definite, there's no objective morality. So having a group with a defined moral system, it works perfectly. But when you go into like the grayer areas, it seems unnecessary and almost, in a sense, sometimes counterintuitive. Anyway, I'll let Chris speak.
I was thinking about, I think morality systems are really good in games. They can really give you a lot of pathos. They can give you, but for all the good they do, it really comes down to like the story behind the game. And I think Ian was alluding to this before, because you have something like, Mass Effect, or throw a cat at a Bethesda game, or Far Cry 3. And if you didn't have, even like this, even with the Bethesda game, you're literally creating a character for yourself. In any other game, you're following a certain character, so you're buying what he's selling you. So therefore, you believe the world, you believe the character. So the morality systems, there's many great reasons why they're there, and I find that they help immerse me in the game more. But again, if your story sucks, or if your characters are terrible, like who the fuck gives a shit what he's going to decide?
Not going to care either way,
because he could jump off a cliff. I just want to finish this goddamn game.
Well, I think like any game mechanic, it really depends on how you use it, the implementation of it, and I don't know if I agree with the fact that that you need a strong story to pull off a strong morality system, or vice versa. And I think one game that has which is a great story but has not a great morality or a karma system, is Bioshock. I think it's pretty much useless as
maybe.
The difference between stealing the what the hell is it called? What's the
Little Sisters?
Yeah, but what's the atom? Stealing the atom from the Little Sisters and not is kind of negligible at the end of the game, and negligible in terms of your playing experience, I think.
Well, I kind of want to expand upon what I said earlier. Now that we're beyond the introductions, I said in D&D you have gods which are defined. When you exit that world and you enter the worlds of Fallout or Infamous,
you lose that aspect.
The game developers are the gods, putting their morality on you, on what they view as a good action or an evil action. And sometimes in worlds where I'm going to give a general example here. The idea that to sacrifice one person to save 10 might be viewed by the game developers as an evil action, where in reality that might be the more moral choice. So you're dealing with arbitrary moral values as prescribed by game developers.
Sure. Like, all right. Let me. Steve mentioned Bioshock. I'm not sure if I totally agree with what you're saying. I guess yes, sort of in the end, it's sort of negligible. Like, as story-wise, kind of, like, you get, like, 3 or 4 endings, right? I think there's 3 endings to Bioshock, and, like, the narration is pretty much the same, except the tone of voice. I think that, we'll check out our, Bioshock-centric episode, but the inflection of your ending narration changes. It gets, like, more increasingly annoyed or, like, despicable, depending on what you did. But if you save the little sisters, every 3 I believe you saved, you would get a reward of more Adam, which of course changes actual gameplay. You can have more upgrades in that sense. So like, your morality is sort of linked to the what gameplay you want out of it, or like what risks versus rewards you're going to do in terms of that.
But I'm stealing this directly from another commenter I did while researching for this interview. Fortunately, I can't remember the source for this. But yes, I'm admitting I'm plagiarizing here. Is that it's not a matter of morality at that point; it's a matter of numbers.
That's true.
And
it's cold hard logic in a sense.
Yes, and in fact, doing the right thing is a matter of logic, which, in reality, sometimes the logical viewpoint is often criticized as the heartless one. So, in a sense, it even further removes itself from actual true morality.
Yeah, finishing up that. Yeah, Bioshock is kind of more the carrot and stick approach. It's like, yeah, you can choose A or B, but we're going to try to like encourage you to choose A. But back to morality.
If you knew about though, that's the thing. Just real quickly, if you play Bioshock for the first time, there was no indication that was going to happen. Like, they're presenting the moral choice first and not telling you what gameplay reward you get out of it.
I can't remember how I found out about that.
But that's going against kind of how modern gaming is, though. That there's so much information out there about games that you have to work hard not
to know it. That's true.
So,
I'm going to go back to something you said before Bioshock, but this is going to be a spoiler for Mass Effect. So,
spoilers abound.
There is a DLC between Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3, and this was something I was actually going to bring up in our first podcast tonight, where Shepard has to, in order to stave off an impending Reaper attack, he has to allow a colony of Batarians, 300,000 people, to be destroyed in order to save. Because I think what happens is he would destroy the mass gate right there and stop, an imminent Reaper attack. So in other words, there is a good example of the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few, and regardless of whether you play this DLC or not, Shepard does that. So you can decide to play that game. Beth didn't want to play the game for a while because she just couldn't pull the trigger on that. She, it wasn't until I played it and she saw how it was done that she went back and she played it. And the thing is, that's already chosen for you.
I was going to ask you that question. To be clear, like you're saying, it's sort of like a canonical choice that was made for you, regardless of whether or not you played this. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so I
did not know that.
You can go into Mass Effect 3 and you've already done that, or you can actually you play the DLC where you actually do that. And like I said, the morality system is something Beth and I often discuss when we're playing games, because it's like, did you do that mission? No, I couldn't do it because, I couldn't do that to this character for whatever reason. And what's interesting is Mass Effect, like you said, makes this choice for you. And it doesn't really, it does a numbers judgment on it. Like say, the character really had no choice, but the character within himself and the views other people have around him are going to be skewed based upon that. So it's not like this morality, this decision was made for you and there's no consequence. This decision was made for you and you're dealing with the repercussions, both positive and negative, on that. And the reason I brought up Beth and I playing it at different times was not to take that Beth couldn't, do that. It was just that because of the morality system, because the universe was so close, it was actually hard for her to witness. And even though, so that's something where I feel like the issue, whether you play it or not, or the choice of when you play it, or if you play the DLC or not, I think the game does a really, really, really good job of discussing the positives and negatives of all the repercussions of that action.
Sure. I guess my question is so do you get a different reward? Like, do you get like an item or XP reward? Is it different whether you do it or not? Because you said again, it's canonical, or like apparently they make you choose that regardless of if you played it. So do you get like a as if it were a Fallout game, you get a weapon or something? Like just spoil that for me.
Which you get are the Xbox or whatever achievements that say you played this DLC, whatever.
All right. So I want to bring it to Fallout 3 for a second. Okay, the villains of Fallout 3 are the Enclave, who mass murder ghouls and other creatures they feel are...
They're genociding people.
Yes, who feel that...
Civilization.
Are not... Are tainted by the wasteland. Mm-hmm. And you see the characters... You, as the protagonist, you meet ghouls, you get to know them, but from the Enclave's point of view, they're meeting feral ghouls, they're destroying what they feel are threats to themselves. You, however, commit genocide against raiders. You commit genocide against super mutants.
That's a very good point.
And because the game developer gods of this world feel that your actions are moral, you get no punishment for that. However, the villains are doing the exact same thing, but are evil because, once again, arbitrary morality.
Although, to be fair, you are attacked... If you encounter most of these people or mutants or whatever, you'll be attacked by them if you don't attack them first.
But to be fair, if let's say you're realistically...
Because they're programmed that way.
If you're realistically in that world, and you had nothing but experience of feral ghouls attacking you, and you saw a random ghoul walking like in the distance, you'd probably kill it. And karmically, you would get punished for that in that game, in the rules of the game world. So again, I'm just saying, morality is arbitrary, morality is subjective, and this is the major flaw in morality systems in the games.
Well, and I was actually going to agree with Stevo, because that's absolutely positively right when it comes to like the raiders or the mutants. They're going to attack you first, kind of leaving you in no choice, but like you go into the game with the de facto state of war between you and X, Y, and Z things. Yeah, and it's only once in a while you'll meet a mutant that's not a bad guy or whatever, but yeah, you walk into the game with these are your enemies. Your enemies are not going to give you any choice.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing. You will meet. Actually, I don't remember if you ever meet a raider that you don't kill, but you will meet like the.
You talk to
random
some,
super mutant here or there.
Anyway, yeah.
There you go.
But again,
that's a super mutant.
The thing is, in like we're told nicely by red dots on the map what's enemy and what's not. Again, if you try to bring this into actual philosophical morality, I understand the points you guys are making. You're at war, but I feel that kind of breaks down upon further analysis.
Of course, I'm going to agree. Like going back to something you just said just earlier. Yes, morality is always subjective. There is no absolute. That's the whole point of I would say philosophically, the whole point of arguing and thinking about and trying to draw out the, diagram morality, if you will. So yes, you're right. I think it's funny. Like again, on the surface, it's funny what you said, but the programmers are in fact the gods of this. They choose the morality that you're going to sort of follow. They give you a false choice, almost like if you're going to do this or the other. But one sect is drawn as the falling on the side of the evil morality, and the other sect is falling on the side of good. But that could change arbitrarily on a dime. Absolutely.
And yeah, I don't know. I guess it's like good/evil, but in the Fallout games, I always looked at it more of like for/against. Like what doing this thing is going to make me look better in the eyes of like everyone that I want to get on their good side, then I'll get positive karma points. And if it'll make me look bad, then I'll get negative karma points.
But one of the issues is you get punished for stealing from people if no one gets caught. If you didn't get caught doing that. Right. So there is a determined idea.
Who's judging that, right? Because nobody saw it. Yeah, sure.
It's developer gods.
What I was going to say with... the good thing that Bethesda games do is they do give you the opportunity to decide with different factions and so forth. And I think they really do it. I was thinking about New Vegas. Mm-hmm. We were talking about that because I was
waiting for someone to say that.
Yeah, I was going to say you could decide. You can go independent. You could side with
NCR,
NCR, you
Caesars,
Caesars,
Mr. House,
yeah, and Mr. House is where
no one.
or no one, right? Which is what I should have chosen. I believe the NCR is propaganda, and I got pissed off.
See, they got you though.
Fuck them.
Programmer gods got you.
Yeah, they did. They did. But you look at something. What I was thinking, I don't want to divert from Fallout too much, but on the subject of Bethesda, I think in Skyrim they kind of took it to the next level because you've got the Thieves Guild, you've got the different guilds. So not only do you have the main story arc as to what faction you're going to support or not, but getting there, the journeys, like the different storylines are their own morality choice. The different guilds are their own morality choice.
But and that's what's great about New Vegas is that the factions are so much better of a system of
than morality itself. Yeah.
But
agreed.
I'm a huge fan of Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, and if you liked the Skyrim system of handling, their system of handling factions was like the perfect method. And the beauty of it is that no faction you chose was without extreme flaw.
Oh, I was going to say, like, getting into the factions thing, I think this becomes more of a reputation system than a karma system, which I actually prefer.
Which is better. I agree with you.
So,
I think we all do.
The way that you score points or whatever is based on how other people look at you. Which I always thought was kind of a better way to do it, and also a better way to kind of manufacture like story endings, which is a big part, which nobody's mentioned yet, and a big part of the reason that you do karma based or reputation based games is because you can make games with multiple endings, and games that come out differently have replay value in that way.
I have a question for you guys. Again, I mentioned earlier that Morales Systems has its root in Dungeons and Dragons. I understand its role in role-playing games because it does have that immersion factor to it and can tailor endings, as Steve-O just said. Does it work in stories with independent narratives where you have a third-person character that you're not necessarily has its own story and you're not necessarily role-playing?
Yes, it can. I agree that it's not as nuanced as you keep going back to D&D, of course, because there's so many other factors to that. And just the way, again, the nature of those games are different. But I think it certainly can. But yes, it's going to be sort of automatically filtered through a narrower range than you would have otherwise. But I want to go back to something real quick. I agree with you guys absolutely in that the karma system or the reputation system from New Vegas was such a better way to do things. Because it's no longer a dichotomy of you're good or you have a bad karma, good karma. It's your relationships with every single sect in society, or in the setting of the game. Agreed. And I think, and on top of that, or sort of integrated in it, is something they did, which I think this is what I was going to say, going back to the arbitrariness of morality, is that it's not a choice between good or evil. It's more of the choice between the lesser of two evils, or just a great a rock and a hard place kind of choice. Neither of the sides, even if you have two sides or more to side with or to choose whatever allegiances you're going to throw behind, each of them has their own agenda and possibly are justified in some certain way. It's sort of a Rorschach litmus test in the sense of what you yourself are going to choose, given the limited range of options in this narrative.
And they're certainly all looked at as evil by the other ones.
By the other ones, yeah, obviously.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I was going to make another point, but that's one thing I do have to say Bethesda does really well. That the world is gray, even no matter what faction you choose. Probably less so in
nobody's the heroes, and nobody's sort of
probably less so
villains.
in 3 than Skyrim or Vegas. But yeah, you're dealing with a lot of lesser of two evils kind of thing.
Going back to my previous point, sorry for
no, I was going to say I actually have something to follow up on that one.
I find that third person narratives tend to, as Chris said earlier, especially if it's a franchise, tend to force morality choices canon-wise.
I agree with that.
But they also, I find, are the most likely to have one or the other. because they have to have, in a sense, where you can't have the nuance of like shades of gray in order to have a limited number.
A sustainable character almost in franchise, yeah.
They have to either choose to be extremely evil or extremely good. I can think of Infamous, which you had to be a terrible human being or a saint, and there is no part for having true human emotion there. Dante's Inferno, which had you literally you're a saint, or you're punishing people in hell, or absolving their sins, which makes no sense both to the actual story,
the source material, or anything else. Sure.
Well, about the third person, and I bring up two of my favorite games, Red Dead Redemption and Mass Effect, is that it is more of a reputation system. In Red Dead, you could either be like, the anti-hero, or you can be the mustache twirling villain. And in Mass Effect, you could either go Paragon or Renegade. And there's some gray area there. You could still be Paragon and punch a reporter out who deserves it. It's all good. But what I think when you're talking about when you're playing third person games like that, you really are kind of playing a novel. You're playing a story, and you can make,
as I said in the Red Dead, you're RPing as John Marston. More or less.
But I mean, yeah, more or less. But the thing is, I think what goes to the quality of those are what goes into any really good narrative. And this is probably what I was bringing up with my first point about story, about strength of character, that you really have to buy the world. You really have to buy the character for those morality choices to make sense.
Matter at all.
Yeah, and sometimes you're rewarded with achievement or a special skill or a special cutscene, whatever. But to your point about the third person, where it's not completely immersive, where you're, as Scott said, RPGing, that's really where strength of character, strength of story comes into.
Well, actually, and speaking of immersion, when you're dealing with a third-person narrative where they punish you for not choosing
the canonical
one line
the quote
or the other, you get like, if your character if you're playing if they want to have elements of role playing and you feel your character would do something but you're being punished in game for doing that kind of does break that immersion there.
It's a cognitive dissonance thing again, as I love to keep saying and misusing here and there, but it's something like that, sure. Mm-hmm. So let me do kind of a quick rundown thing. Like, I guess the problem I have with it essentially becomes it's cartoonishly. Like Fable is a good example. You're either cartoonishly a saint or cartoonishly a fucking nightmare. So like in that sense, like that becomes boring. They almost should ask you, like, I've heard this elsewhere, but they might as well ask you at the beginning of the game whether or not you're going through a good playthrough or a bad playthrough, because to sort of like talk about padding, like that's sort of a way to like, oh, I want to see the alternate ending if I'm good or bad, then I have to play through it again and make every other opposite decision. It's kind of a bullshit thing. And also, like, it also creates, like, narratively wise, it's sort of an inconsistent character. If, like, in one instance, like, oh, I'm going to murder this guy, I'm going to slit this guy's throat, and then in the next fucking chapter or whatever, you have a similar choice. And I'm like, no, I'll totally save this guy. Like, I won't rob him or I won't, like, betray him. Like that's completely inconsistent. It's almost like ludonarrative dissonance, which we'll certainly talk about and cover later. But
actually,
again, at the end of the day, I'm saying is that, of course, it breaks immersion. And certainly, if it was more nuanced, that might not be the case.
Going. I believe it was the same article I referenced earlier, but failed to give a source because I don't remember. Mm-hmm. But they were saying that it's absurd that you have a character who can like kill like 20 children, but because he saved enough cats,
it balances out. Yeah, like the karma, it's like the karma meter thing. It's still like artificially like it's ridiculous in that sense. Like, yeah, agreed. That's really funny though.
You were talking about the cognitive dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I was going to say if there's one flaw in Red Dead is the fact that you could be a criminal or you can be like an anti-hero, and the story's not going to change at all. And I think that was the biggest.
You're still railroaded regardless. Yeah,
sure. That story doesn't change. And in Mass Effect, I think the biggest complaint was that if you played that there wasn't enough of a divide of whether you played Paragon and Renegade, which I'm not going to get into it now. My point, when you RPG a character whose narrative you're following, my thing is you're given 3 choices, and the psychology behind why you played Paragon or why you played Renegade, or if you both played Paragon, the decision you made was how you view that universe. Beth and I both played Paragon, and she chose a different ending than I did, and that's something we'll discuss about something else. But when you have a story like that,
it allows you to do that.
Yeah, that part's going to become subjective. So yeah, I think in terms of third person, something like Mass Effect does handle it better than Red Dead.
But man, Mass Effect is in all senses a role-playing game. Although it is a third-person role-playing game. I guess I was mentioning
it's a
more
Bioware game.
We're not talking about the camera. I don't think Ian's talking about the camera. He's talking about you are your character in Mass Effect.
Yeah,
right?
no.
Whereas when Ian says third person, he's talking about like
the view.
Gordon Freeman in Half-Life.
No, but I'm talking about both of that. But I'm talking about both of them because you're either playing a male Shepard or a female Shepard, but that character still has his arcs.
You couldn't play David Bowie Shepard?
You couldn't play David Bowie Shepard, whereas opposed to a Bethesda game, where you're really literally creating your avatar.
I actually think there's an interesting...
Which, Dungeons & Dragons is the same thing. You're creating your own avatar.
Mm-hmm. I think that BioWare tends to straddle the line on
Agreed.
that. Whether we're doing with Dragon
Without
Age
question.
or Mass Effect.
Sure. I think that's sort of why we respect them in that sense. They do it more nuanced, yes.
Mm-hmm. But to get heavy for a second, I think the idea that that you have to be extremely saintly or incredibly evil deals with kind of the medieval Christian mythology look. That you must, to get rewarded, you must behave exactly
100% one way or the other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, and any other thing is that kind of evil. And I wonder if that's a psychological leftover on games today, or if game developers are just lazy.
It could be. It could be both. Like I think certainly there's something to be said that yes, perhaps that's sort of like that lingering mindset because it's been so ingrained in much of like a large portion of geography of humanity, if you will.
The devil and the angel on the shoulder.
Like it's such a classic image, of course, and it's informed by Christian mythology, absolutely. But I want to bring something interesting. I just thought of this. I wrote it down just before. One of the first games I digitally downloaded was Farcry 2, and I thought they had like, while they didn't have a morality system per se, there was no like gauge, etc. What you could do is that there were 2 factions at war in Africa, and you're sort of a mercenary, working for them. Every time you accepted a mission from one, you would get a phone call or like a little GPS call or whatever. Like you would get a contact from somebody who a character you met before, who would say, "Hey, you want to subvert this mission?" So you could do that every single mission, and it would be like, again, it would be a slightly different experience. The mission would change like halfway through, and then you get an achievement. Like I remember called playing both sides. Like for the north half of the map, it was called playing both sides ellipses. And then if you did the same exact thing for the second act of the final act of the game, against the middle, of course. But I thought it was like interesting, sort of like the nature versus nurture thing from Red Dead. But like that was one I just thought of it. Like that's kind of a really good nuanced thing that it's sort of black and white morality on the surface, but you're allowed the chance that, of course, the gray morality is really all that exists.
You played Infamous Second Sons.
Yes.
I played Infamous 1. I think it's sort of hilarious. I played both the good and the evil to get the trophies because I'm an addict. And you're doing the exact same thing, more or less for the exact same reasons. One tends to be more selfish, one tends to be the other. But you're basically freeing the city from the grips of an evil, supervillain. But the thing is, if you're slightly more selfish, everyone in the city hates you, and it's
the Fable effect.
Yes, and it makes no again. Your moral choices are extremely like not enough that it would have such a gigantic effect on all the people. Or at least that's my opinion on it.
Sure, like again, it's lazy to an extent, I would say, but also like maybe like people kind of expect it nowadays in a sense. Like okay, like Second Son was almost the exact same thing. your motivations, your character, like your arc is basically the same. It's whether or not you're going to be a complete monster or like like the endings were okay, like, but
it's not even a complete monster.
It's
like,
much such a surface thing.
The first couple moral choices in the first game were whether you get a food package gets delivered to the quarantine zone, and you get to either take it and share it with your people or hand it out to people. Again, like it's similar to how everyone else was acting, I think. And then another one is, do you go up and punch a cop in the face to start a riot, or do you like trick the cops into
stealthily
starting a riot?
inside it? Yeah, sure.
So again, like these aren't like none of the choices that I remember.
Either way, a riot is going to happen. Like, yeah, that's what you're saying.
Like, are really affecting the populace more than you helping them break from the oppression.
Sure, it's an interesting. It's almost like the insanity meter thing, which we can get into like in a different cast as well. But yeah, it's like you are being evil. You're like, well, maybe like that's what you say I am. Like, maybe I think this choice is like actually the good choice. Of course. Yeah, in that sense, like, again, that's why, to answer your question, like to expand more upon it, I think it is kind of lazy in a sense, but maybe like it's helpful to like you're gonna be good at, it plays to your bias is something that Chris likes to say, and of course it's going to. So maybe it's interesting, like, to litmus test people in that sense.
Well, Chris, do you want to go?
I'm kind of straddling something, and I want to know. Besides Scott and I, did everybody play Far Cry 3? Because the final choice,
that's an interesting litmus
the
test.
final choice you make in the game is a morality thing, and why Scott?
Very divisive. Black and white as hell.
A very divisive
I
thing.
Think, but yeah, go
But
ahead.
you and I both had different reasons we both chose the two ending choices. I chose one ending. He chose the other one.
You can totally spoil it if you want.
Do you want to spoil it? Okay. So you can either choose to kill your friends and stay with what's her name? Citra, because she's been grooming you to be a warrior for the.
You're like the warrior king of their tribe.
Yeah, you become
Rakayat.
The Rakayat. Yeah, you become the warrior king of the tribe, or you can free your friends and let them go home. She ends up dying, but you end up staying on the island.
Go home with them.
Yeah. Well, no, you don't go home with them. You stay on the island.
Not if you free them.
No, you
I
stay
don't
on.
remember, actually.
Oh yeah, you stay on the island.
Yeah, you're right.
You sit on the beach and watch them go on the lament.
You're right.
Because what the game is saying to you is that this experience is going to change you. Whether you decide
it changes you in both senses. You're right about that.
You can't go home again. In one instance, you die. In one instance,
you literally cannot go anywhere because
yeah.
you're fucking dead. But yeah, true.
And the thing is, my character, once I realized, because in the game, you lose one of your brothers right away. Another brother and your friends are all scattered throughout the island. At one point, you think your other brother's dead. You find out that he's alive.
It's a very well-written story.
It's an extreme, but this goes back to my how are you RPGing the game? If it's a quality character, you can immerse yourself into it. And as soon as I found out that Riley was alive, I turned to Beth and I said, whatever my final decision is, whatever gets Riley off the island is the one I'm going to make, because that's the way I'm RPGing this thing. That to me was that ended any gray area. Whereas Scott played it like his character had become, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but your character had,
sure.
Yeah, you tell.
Sure. So you chose that one, and I of course chose the one where I murdered. Like, it's a very graphic scene where Citra is something like, you must choose Jason. You stay with us. You're one of us now. And like, I felt that my character Jason Brody indeed became one of them. That was like, I spent the whole game, doing missions for them, like getting more tattoos, etc., which is like your upgrades in the game. So at the end of it, Jason Brody should have been alienated from his friends. They have nothing in common anymore. There's no reason for them to be friends. He might as well sacrifice them. And then again, I like to say this about it, of course, it's Bioshock because Citra betrays you and murders you.
Yeah.
You have there's a very graphic sex scene. You slit your friends' throats, then you bang Citra in a very graphic scene, and then she stabs a knife into your chest and says like, my child will now be the greatest. Like, she was using you the whole game in order to get that the greatest war will be your child, not you, Jason Brody. You've been sacrificed in the name of this.
But one thing I loved about it, and I know that ZP hated the ending, but the thing I loved about it, and this is one of the things that Beth and I were talking about, was that, and she really liked watching me play the game, was the fact that I told her, I said, he can never go home again. Whether he lives through this or not, he's never leaving the island. But I'm glad that the developers were smart enough to be like, we're smart enough to be like, he's going to free his friends, but he's staying. He's not going back. Whereas like a lesser story game would have been like, I'm turning back on him. Come on, guys, let's go home. And ends with you watching the island.
It would have been like
that would have been a
bullshit,
cop-out.
like false conclusion. Yeah,
Exactly.
But I think there's a difference between having a moral choice at the end of the game to really
scattering in throughout.
then having like random, again, arbitrary choices throughout the game that do nothing to necessarily service the plot.
Well, I mean, putting one right at the end of I never played Far Cry 3, so I don't know how
You still should.
Yeah, you should.
Good.
Well, perhaps, but anyway.
The ending's ruined.
Yeah, the ending's completely fucking ruined now.
It's totally worth to play it. But
Spoilers in your
Whatever,
face,
it doesn't
bitches.
matter. My point was that is if the only real choice that you have is at the end of the game, that's another way of doing things for developers too, which completely makes sense. Like, it gives you the feeling that you've made a large choice, and it stops them from having to program a whole bunch of different shit into the game.
No,
you know?
but you know what the beauty of that is, and it goes back to the quality of characters, the quality of storytelling, is the fact that you do all this stuff in the game for the usual carrot stick reward. You do this mission, it propels the story. You do this thing, you get an upgrade, you get experience, whatever. You get a new tattoo, which is, your upgrades. But the beauty of it is you don't really have any major moral decisions to make until the end. And what the game is smart enough to do is it doesn't give you these little choices left or right to go throughout the game. It basically says, this is what we're putting you through. This is the way the story is going on. These are the things that people are telling you. This is the stuff you're taking in. And the ending is, how did you interpret this journey? The ending isn't really, I guess, a moral so much as how to what level you were interpreted, what level you were involved, and to what degree you interpreted what happened to your character.
I feel like really that's just a kind of a way for I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure it was terrifically written in at the end, but I feel like that's just kind of a way for them to be like, all right, let's not write two different stories.
Believe
here.
me, it was.
Yeah, it was.
Is there a save right before the choice?
No, it's interesting.
Nope.
There isn't. So they kind of like. It depends whether or not you think they're fucking you in that sense. Like, there isn't a save, so you can only do one during your playthrough. I of course looked up the other one like on YouTube or whatever because I was curious to see it. But I kind of like it's sort of like, yeah, it's forcing you to pick one ending. Like, in that sense, I thought it was a good, like, it could have been a cheap trick again in any other game, but in this one it was pulled off well. Like, I didn't mind that they did that. It, I was just real quick. Both endings sort of make sense to Jason Brody's arc. It's just
both totally
as Chris said, it's almost like it sort of like plays on your bias as to which one you think is the, in quotes, the most correct or moral one.
Is there an example? I can't think of an example right now. But is there an example of a game that tried doing something similar that didn't pull it off as correctly as well?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of softball me, but there's one more game on my list that I was going to talk about. Was kind of Dishonored. I think we might agree with that. Like,
oh yeah,
you can either not kill anybody, like, and also they had sort of like a weird, like, one of the loading screens implied, they said something like, if you don't kill people, you'll get a different ending, and the good ending, it was a good and evil dichotomy in that sense. And so my personal playthrough in Dishonored, I sort of bounced back and forth, and yeah, like it was like, again, like inconsistency, like. Yeah, one mission I murdered every guard ever, and next mission I didn't get seen by anybody at all.
But at the end, it came to a choice of A or B.
Yeah,
and
it was a binary choice. Of course.
And at the end, it's just like, because I did the same thing. I flip flopped. I did the stealth ones to get when I knew there were certain achievements, and I did the other ones where I really got bored of stealthing. I wanted to kill people, just to watch the raps.
Just to
come,
see it.
Sure,
of course.
But ultimately, regardless of what, you'd still have that choice at the end to go left or right.
That's true.
And I don't really, because it was a silent protagonist, because there was no real way to immerse yourself in that. I mean, really, I didn't really feel much connection to Corvo.
I mean, yes and no. True, I guess. Like, yeah, like, again, we sort of referenced the ZP thing, but like, it was funny in that sense. Like, say nothing if you want another suicide mission, and you're gonna be doing it anyways. Like, regardless, like, you're gonna have to do it. But they still give you like the choice. Like, all right, you might remember this. I don't know if you saw it. There was a little moment in Dishonored where you're at the hub town, the hub little like little fort, and you could walk in on like the maid who is bathing, and she'd be like, "Can you please leave?" and you could leave, like, you know, and it was fine. But if you didn't, I did it both ways. I reloaded my save. She was like, I thought you were a better man than this. Like, it was like a little, like, funny little moment. Like, you're just like standing there watching her, like, in a bathtub, and she's like, I thought you were more noble, but apparently you're standing here watching me bathe. Like, it wasn't even a moral choice thing. It was like almost like so in that sense, like, they had better moments like that than their actual moral the choice system binary thing was in the main game, which is kind of interesting. I thought it was funny, but I don't know, like, you know, like, so I guess we sort of everything we said, like, they can be effective if they're relevant to the story and done well, and not, like, you know.
We could do it like this. It's just like, all right, if you're going to be playing carrot and stick all along, make the journey of whatever you're going to be more worthwhile, sure, as opposed to just being like, hey, if you play it this way, you're going to get this achievement. Have it integral to the story.
Mm-hmm. In a sense, I agree. If you're doing a role-playing game which you really want to immerse your character in, that's the most effective way. Although, again, reputations are more effective, especially when reputations butt heads against each other.
I think they're more effective and more realistic, as we all might agree.
But also, reputations are good if you're not going to get any major story thing out of it, but you're going to get, like, secondary things. Let's say
world building stuff. Sure.
Yeah.
But again, I feel that even if morality systems can be done well, there are better alternatives to it, and that can be done just as effectively.
And maybe we'll see the future of those.
Like, I mean, what are you thinking about?
Yeah, that's my
question. Again, as I've just mentioned, reputations. I think can
that's
easily
expand on that versus the.
But
I think they're starting to anyway.
Yes.
It seems like it's kind of moving in that direction now. And
agreed.
You know, I think a lot of it has to do with system resources and game resources. A karma system. Well, you know, a game without any kind of system like this is much easier to produce than one with it. A karma system is easier to produce than a reputation system because it only depends on 2 poles usually.
But that's the thing, that the most effective reputations or karmic systems are when you have all those nuances. Where, like, for instance, I remember Fallout 3 had a random thing that if you were neutral, you got plus 30 towards speech or something like that. And I remember I never played Fallout 2. Supposedly had quite a lot of there are benefits to neutral, to good, and to evil. So. The more nuanced you get, though, the more difficult it is to program. So, and if you really want to get into true realistic morality, that might almost be
impossible to program. Yeah. Sure.
So, reputation systems are more effective.
Agreed. Well, that was a big thing. Like, just to wrap it up real quick and to tie in like what we said, Fallout 2, yes, did have that was when the reputation system was rather expansive. You could have like reputation for mafia houses and like everyone else. So like. If you guys might sort of remember, the fans were sort of taken aback in Fallout 3 when it was just a binary system. And then when they brought it back, like, New Vegas was a callback to 2 because, yes, it was more nuanced. And, yes, of course, it's probably more difficult to program. Not probably, it outright is. However, if you take the time to do that and yes, have the resources to pour into it, I think you give your players a more by default, of course, a more rounded experience because it's more nuanced and because it's not just like an A or B, like, oh, I'm either good or evil, like good karma, bad karma. No, I have various relationships, like many groups. Some of them can be at war with each other, but both like me. So, you know, yeah, I'm interested to see, like, I agree with you that I think we're seeing a sort of a push and a move towards more nuanced systems like that now that in general, technology, games have come to the point that are able to accommodate that kind of thing.
What made me really happy is 2 games that I played that I was disappointed with recently that didn't really have morality systems, but had what I'd call lazy writing.
Yeah.
And my thing is, when I would go to YouTube, because I just wanted to finish the goddamn games, I was like, listen to guys on YouTube going, oh my God, come on, stop, enough with the fucking padding, which is good to me because it says that, like, we're not the only ones noticing, like, shitty writings in games. Because I think we all agree, morality system or not, whether you're doing karma or reputation or whatever, if you don't have a believable world, if you don't have a way to get yourself involved in the character, whether it's your avatar or whether it's just an intriguing character or story, the game's gonna fall flat on its face.
It almost live or dies by that.
Yeah. Dishonored, Scott, was a great, fun game to play, but I really didn't give a shit about Corvo.
What were the 2 games that you played recently?
Dying Light and Escape Dead Island.
Because you mentioned that you had played 2 games.
Well, I was trying not to divert the thing into padding.
I was just curious.
My whole point was...
We'll cover the padding in those games later.
We're going to discuss that later. But my whole point was, and yeah, I'll talk to you about Escape Dead Island in a minute. My whole point was that regardless of all this, I think what's making me happy is that I'm noticing that, these kind of things that we're discussing, the nitpicking things, are becoming important to other gamers. That there is a divide, as we were saying before, between... People
want more out of it instead of the A/B choice.
Yeah, whether you want to just a straight-up shooter and you want to play online, or if you want a really good, compelling story. And hopefully, when we're talking morality systems, karma versus reputation, stuff like that, the cream's going to rise to the top on those as well.
Sure.
I'm not as optimistic because even though technology is growing and the movement for better games you still have you still need the will to work. And as AAA games are pressured to produce quickly, I'm hoping that we have I still think they're going to churn out majority of bland games with a couple of gems strewn within. And
I won't buy those games. I mean, after my recent experience over the last year, I've become so fed up with games. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to buy Dead Island 2. I'm planning on Arkham. I will buy anything that Bethesda will put out pretty much. But I don't know. I'm going to think about it. If they release another Assassin's Creed, I may think about whether or not I'm going to buy that. I'm not going to go diving after, a game because it's a AAA game anymore, because for that very reason. I mean, so if they're going to pull that kind of crap, they're going to lose people like me.
Sure, maybe, but I mean, to sort of cover this, I'm not going to go into it, but it's a business decision, and you're trying to reach a broad audience, and maybe that's an easy way to do that. However, I do think, like, as Ian said, sort of like his vision of the future, if you will, games are going to start breaking off more and more, and being able to do more nuanced things like that. Or I think there will be more fresh ideas coming of how to use that as a mechanic. I personally am optimistic about it. As we said, you've seen it change a little bit here and there. So, yes, the ones we've seen before, like they went through growing pains, of course, but I think largely developers learn from those experiences, and yes, learn from the feedback of their fans that say, hey, we don't want this is boring now, like give us something more, and that will be more interesting by default.
And that speaks to the developers that we keep talking about over and over again.
And to be honest, I think we're going to start seeing indie developers start to get more.
Absolutely, I absolutely agree with that.
Come a lot larger into the frame here. Especially if AAA titles start to go downhill and the technology to make games starts to become easier to do, which it seems like it's just going to keep happening.
I agree with you, cause especially with the Telltale games. Yeah, definitely.
Sure, yeah. So I hope we'll see more in the future, but it seems that it is indeed trending towards. So I'm interested in seeing what's going to happen. So I think we'll wrap it up for now. And I've enjoyed talking about moral conscience with you, and I'll see you in the next Morasses.
This has been Syntax Error. Thank you as always for listening, and we will see you next time. Music by Stephen Hermosi. Editing and engineering by Chris Morgan. Syntax Error is part of a Lost Signals Productions. All rights reserved.